Good morning.
So good to be here. It was, I think it was interesting. I interviewed in November, and one of the things I said when I interviewed was, I feel drawn to teach. And things kept happening. I was supposed to teach in February, and that didn't work. I had back injury. So I said, oh, I'll teach Mother's Day. That'll be pretty easy. It was funny, when I first signed up for it, I had been going to a different community, spiritual community, the last few years. I thought, oh, I'll do the lesson I've always heard on Mother's Day, which is talk about the divine feminine. And then I had about 2 weeks after I signed up, and I went, oh, that's not Course in Miracles concept. Oops, okay. So got to start again, and I thought, well, I'll talk about what Course in Miracles says about motherhood and about women and the feminine. And then I had one of those oopsie moments again. I knew it wasn't in there much in Course in Miracles, but when I started looking and I did a search online, I found out Course in Miracles, the original edition, actually never goes to the feminine. It never talks about mothers or females or women, like not a single quote in the original edition. I did find one in the Clarification of Terms, which is the FIP edition, but it wasn't here in the original. So I really considered, I was just like, well, why is that? And I'll tell you, I didn't ever fully get an answer to it, but I'll share a little bit of my experience with you. Actually, I would say several authors, several writers I read talked about that Jesus, or Helen, however you want to say Course in Miracles was written, that there's a redefining of terms in the Course. That things such as Son of God doesn't just mean Jesus anymore. Son of God means, everyone. And it talked about redefining salvation and redefining atonement. And then a lot of these authors said, well, it's the same thing with the masculine. That, when Jesus says, him or man, it's inclusive. And I'll say initially I was like, oh, okay. And then I realized that every single author that said that was a man. All of the female authors that talked about it never really came up with an answer as to why there's no feminine in Course in Miracles. And so I kind of looked at that and I was like, I understand, the Course does redefine a lot of terms that we look at. But I thought if I wrote and said, God loves all white people, how would people who are experiencing, they're a different nationality, a different race, are they going to be like, oh yeah, that's inclusive? And I thought, a lot of people probably wouldn't. And for me, I think there is a little bit of, am I quite ready to say that the masculine means everybody? I don't know. But I said, okay, God, I know you got me doing this lesson for a reason this week. What is it? Because I don't know what you want me to say. Because it wasn't what I planned. And suddenly I started coming up with the same lesson over and over, which I said, kind of thought it's kind of ironic. It's actually next week's Sunday's lesson. But Reverend Peter's talking next week, so hopefully he's not going to talk on it too much. We'll warn him that I stole his lesson this week. And I came across it when I was doing some reading, and then Reverend Tony actually had shared with me one of the emails we'd gotten about the conference, and it talked about the same lesson, which was 135. And then I thought, okay, this seems to be coming up a lot. I think I might be talking about lesson 135 for Mother's Day. And then I think about 2 days after I thought that, I got in my car, and I had a CD in my car, and the first thing that turned on when I turned on the engine was the CD, and the speaker says, so we're talking about lesson 135 this week. And I went, okay, got it. We'll talk about 135, which was some of the reading we read today. And I just kind of thought, okay, we'll go with it. And 135 is a long lesson, so I'm going to read you some of the quotes from it, but not all of it, because it is one of the longer lessons definitely out there. And it starts off, there's several verses, and then it goes into, it says, a healed mind does not plan. Which that in itself made me laugh, because I'm thinking my planning for this lesson today didn't work. It says, a healed mind does not plan. It carries out the plans which it receives through listening to wisdom that is not its own. It waits until it has been taught what should be done, and then proceeds to do it. So I thought, first of all, I noticed it says a healed mind, and it's lowercase mind. So it's not talking about like God does this, Spirit does this. It's saying the mind, who we see ourselves as. When it's been healed, we stop planning. We stop trying to control what we're doing. And it says, it doesn't say that there is no plan, but it says we begin to listen to the plans. We listen to what is given to us that's not its own. Well, what's not its own? If it's not of mine, it's from God. It's from Spirit. So we listen to that, and it says it waits and then proceeds to move ahead. There's no but in that. It just says, wait, plans, you'll be good. And it says the mind engaged in planning for itself is occupied in setting up control of future happenings. It does not think that will be provided for unless it makes its own provisions. What it has learned before becomes basis for its future goals. So this is, again, it's talking about the mind that hasn't been healed yet. And it says, it's planning for itself based on control of the future. And I thought, isn't that true? Always, what do we want to do? I'm always trying to control. Every time I set up a plan, I'm trying to make things the way I want them to be in the future. And I think, well, why? Because if I don't know what's going to happen, I get scared. I forget that I can trust. It says there's Spirit who's going to give me the plan, but I'm like, if I don't have the plan, I go into fear because the mind thinks it can't be taken care of unless it takes care of itself. And I think a lot of that's based on how we perceive our past experiences, that we look back, and there's two types of reasoning. There's what's called deductive, which deductive is based on laws, rules. And there's inductive reasoning, which is what we usually live by. Inductive reasoning says, I'm going to base my decision, I'm going to base what's going to happen on what I've experienced in the past. So an easy example is, it rained yesterday. We're in San Francisco. It rained the day before. Does that mean 100% it's going to rain today? And inductive reasoning, that's where it goes. It says, well, it has to rain today because that's my experience. And we do that with our lives. We think, well, I'm going to judge past experiences. I'm going to say these past experiences were bad. And since those past experiences maybe weren't what I thought I wanted, now I think if I don't control the future, it's going to be bad again. And yet the Course is saying that's not true. The Course is saying there is deductive reasoning, or inductive reasoning, which is the rule to know what we've got. And it says, continue on at this part, it says, what could you not accept if you but knew that everything happens, all events, past, present, and to come, are gently planned by one whose purpose is your good? And that's the inductive reasoning. What would you think if you knew this is planned for your good? What are you going to expect of the future? And it says all things past and present. There is no, well, the past except for this one experience. It's not saying the past except for. I went through a divorce about 5 years ago. Never thought I was the good Christian girl who was never going to get divorced. That was like the most traumatic thing that could have happened at that point in my life. Can I accept that that has been planned for my good? Can I accept that my present is planned for my good? I've talked to a few people recently. I said, I spent about 3 years transforming my body, where I was at the gym every day. And then I ended up having surgeries to remove all the extra skin. I went through all that. And then I've regained about 30 pounds. I haven't regained everything, but I've regained maybe even a little more than 30. We'll say that. And that's been hard. Because I look at it and I'm like, how can this be for my good? This isn't a current situation that I would have chosen. I would like to be the size 8. I was almost to a size 8. Didn't quite make it. And so it says, can you accept everything and the future? Can you accept that the future is also planned? And I love it. It doesn't say it just says it's planned. It says it's gently planned. It's not going to be harsh. God's not looking out to get you. Spirit isn't like, ooh, I want them to learn this lesson, so I'm going to make it really difficult so they get it. It says it's gently planned by one whose purpose is your good. And I thought, that's hard to listen to sometimes. That's for my good. And I think about the Christian teachings I grew up with. It wasn't just I was a sinner because I did bad. I was a sinner because I was born that way. I was bad because I was born. Because that's what people are. They're sinners. I thought that's the Christian teaching I had. And then I grew up, and eventually I did leave the Christian church, but I grew up thinking, well, at my work job, so-and-so got better performance evaluation. Because they would do this whole award thing. If you got a good performance evaluation, you got an award and money. And they would tell everybody who got the awards and who got the money. And I thought, I've learned to compare myself. Or, I said, I'm not this. I've been the fat girl. How much judgment is there about our bodies? I'm not good enough. How can I expect good? And then even Course in Miracles, sometimes we can take stuff from the Course and we make it something now to fit our plan. And so, some portions of the Course, it'll talk about, that we have the belief we've murdered God. And if we've murdered God, well, goodness gracious, how could anything be for our good if we're doing that horribly? And so we can take things from anything in our experience and make it for our unworthiness. And yet it says, what could you not accept if you but knew that it all was for your good? And then it says, I love this part, it says, without defenses. What's the defenses? Going back to the sentence above, it's laying down the thought that you're not good enough. Let the defenses down. Stop saying, I'm not good enough. Be open. Without defenses, you become a light which heaven gratefully acknowledges to be its own. Your followers will join their light with yours, and it will be increased until the world is lighted up with joy. Heaven gratefully wants to acknowledge us as its own. Think of that. Heaven, it's not saying heaven wants to acknowledge what we've done. It says heaven wants to acknowledge that we are its own and is gratefully going to do so. And then it says others will join with me. Separations overcome. I thought about, it says, and the world is lighted up with joy. I'm thinking, wasn't that what we just talked about at the conference? What do we say? Change your mind, change the world. So what's the changing of the mind? It's the letting down the defenses of thinking I'm not good enough. That the world's out to get me, that God's out to get me. Let that down, and then we can become this light, become this joy, and others join with us and light up the world. I said, this is a good lesson. I love 135. I was like, ooh, thank you for leading me to it. 2 little more quotes. It says, we make no plans for how it will be done, but realize that our defenselessness is all that is required for the truth to dawn upon our minds with certainty. If there are plans to make, you will be told of them. They may not be the plans you thought were needed, nor indeed the answers to the problems which you thought confronted you. Again, what does it say? It's our defenselessness. We have to let down the defenses. But when we do, we realize we don't need to make the plans anymore. Because we don't know. We try to think, oh, we know everything. We don't know. We know what we think we experienced in the past. How often have you said, oh, this happened, and then somebody went, no, it didn't. It happened differently. We have our perception of what happened in the past, and I sure know that I ain't being able to see it in the future. And so it says, we can't really make these plans, but we're given the plans. We're given the plans for the things we didn't know we even needed. And it says, heaven asks nothing. You give up nothing in these times today when undefended, you present yourself to your Creator as you really are. How are you? You're good. You're perfect. You're how God created you. So you present yourself to your Creator as you really are. Try not to shape this day as you believe would benefit you most, for you cannot conceive of all the happiness that comes to you without your planning. Think of that one. I love to plan. When I go on vacation, I have every tourist activity prepaid for before I leave. I'm that kind of person. I've got And it says, think of all the happiness that could come to you without the planning. Be open to the miracle that can come into your life. Learn today, and all the world will take this giant stride and celebrate your Easter time with you. I think this even goes back to the lesson today. The lesson talked about the world has nothing that I want. Well, guess what? It says you give up nothing in these times. Why do we give up nothing? Because there's nothing in the world that we want. There's nothing that the physical is going to satisfy us. It's like I said, I'd like to lose 30 pounds. But guess what happens? When we lose 30 pounds, we think what? Well, if I could lose 5 more. And you lose 5 more and you think, well, I lost 5 more, but now my eyes are a little droopy. Maybe I should get an eye lift. And then you get the eye lift done. And you think, well, those are okay, but now, it just keeps going. When we engage in what we're trying to make the world be for us, it ends up we don't get to the happiness that God offers us. But it says, come defend, like I said, undefended, as you really are. And don't try to shape the day, because our dreams are so inadequate compared to what God has for us. God has so much more amazing things if we're open to allowing that good to come into our life. And I love that it says here, all the world will take this giant stride and celebrate your Easter time with you. It doesn't say we're celebrating Good Friday. It says we're celebrating the Easter. Which initially I thought, well, this lesson must be, and I was like, this lesson's way too late in the book. It isn't talking about Easter, the holiday. No Easter bunnies. It's too late. We're in May here. But the Easter time, what is the Easter time? It's the resurrection. It's when you move into a new life. It's when you move into a new birth. And I was thinking back, how does this tie into Mother's Day with the new birth? And I thought that's what it is. You think of the little child, and does the child know when they're like 3 years old? Do they go, oh, I'm bad because I have green pants on and that kid has a red jumper? 3-year-olds aren't thinking that way. They are doing what? They're thinking in innocence. They're just in the moment. They're having fun. And the extent of their planning is, Mom, I want a grilled cheese sandwich. And guess what? If Mom doesn't give them a grilled cheese sandwich, unless they're having a bad day, they're having a good day and trusting Mom, they're going to be happy because Mom fed them still. Mom took them to the park. Mom took care of all the planning for their day. Mom picked out the clothes for them to wear. And I think that's what God is for us, is that mother. And it was interesting, I said there is one spot in clarification of terms where mother is mentioned, but I actually really like a different quote from Helen Schuckman, who this was from her poetry, and it was basically one of the last things she wrote. And it says, he loves you as a mother loves her child, her only one, the only one she has, her all in all, extension of herself, as much a part of her as breath itself. So I think maybe Helen, Jesus, like I said, however you want to put it, didn't use the feminine in Course in Miracles, but I think later on, Helen at least, acknowledges that God acts as our mother in a lot of ways, that God is the loving one, showing us the plans and taking care of us. And we just have to let down our defenses and trust. So, thank you.